In this first tutorial, we will look at the graphical user interface of ANIMER. Like all programs, you need to start it, or in my vernacular, execute it. I have done this already, and so you see in front of you the GUI of ANIMER. I would like to give a quick overview of the menu options. There are 4 main options: File, Edit, View, Viewports, and Help. The menu options of the drop-down menu of File will of course have to do with files. There are the usual options that all applications use: saving and loading. With ANIMER, there are 2 types of files to open or load. If you are wanting to edit or modify a character for the first time, you will need to use the menu option Load Character. You will be able to load either a DirectX file or a Dart Basic Object file, which has the extension of DBO. This is what is known as a mesh file. Loading a character for the first time will take a little while. On the average, it's between 25 to 50 seconds. ANIMER first checks the file to see if it needs repaired. If it does, this will take about 20 seconds. It then needs to load or reload the character, and this will also take around 20 seconds. Of course, it all depends on how many limbs and animations it has. Once it is loaded, one of the first things you might want to do is save the file. Saving a file uses the ANIMER format, which has an extension of AMR. Doing so will allow you to open the file almost instantly. The Save and Open menu options are used for an ANIMER file. So that we don't have to wait for a character to load using Load Character, I will open an ANIMER file by clicking on File and then clicking on the Open option. You will then see a familiar Open dialog window. Select the file you wish to open and then either double-click on it or click once and click on the Open button. And now we see the loaded character. Before we continue on with the main menu options, there are a couple of options I want to mention in the drop-down File menu. I'll not go into any detail except to mention them. These are the Load Without Animations, Export, Load Animations, Save Animations, and Import Animations. Now let's move over to the Edit drop-down menu. There's not much I'm going to say about these options or in the View and Viewports drop-down menu options, as there will be tutorials and other documentation for the details of using them. I will just mention them and say what they generally do in editing or viewing the character. As you are able to see in this menu, you can copy animation keys from one frame to another by using the copy and paste keys. You can do so for one limb or all of the limbs. You can also copy frames from one frame to another and then paste these frames starting with the selected frame. Another very useful editing option is the interpolation options. You can interpolate animations for a limb, or you can interpolate animations of all the limbs between frames. This is useful to give a smoother motion to the animations. For a selected limb, you can also make changes, rotate and move, in multiple frames at once by using the option Apply to Frames. Sometimes you might want to rename a limb and you can do so by using the Rename Selected Limb option. When loaded for the first time, characters will be all white, which makes it difficult to see the limbs and animations. You can add a texture using the Texture Character option, which I will do now. It's easy enough to do. Just click on this option, then find the texture that would go with the character. This happens to be the minus character. You will obviously want to select the right character and to select the D or D2 texture of that character. Voila! You now have a texture to help you view the animations. There is one more menu item that I would like to mention. This is the Reset All Limbs option. If you really made a mess of things, you can reset all the limbs by using this option. I'll give you a quick example. I will first move and rotate several limbs. I'll not go into any details on how to do this. This is just to show the Reset All Limbs option. We can really do a number on this guy. I'll do one more. That looks pretty awful, doesn't he? Am I going to have to reload it to get it back to its original shape? No, all we need to do is just click on the option Reset All Limbs. As you can see, we're back to the default settings. Moving on to the View drop-down menu, you can view the character as textured or wireframe. You can show or hide the limbs. And the default shows the limbs symbols. A useful option is to show the floor. You do this by clicking on the Show Floor option. This is especially useful if you are importing a BBH file. This will be discussed in another tutorial. Adjust View for small objects is also very useful. This is useful when a character is just the size of a raisin when first loaded and all you see is one large circle or small circle. Clicking on this option will enlarge the image 8 times its size. If you do this with an image that is already recognizable as a figure, it will more than likely be too large, and so you may not want to use this method to adjust the size. There's another way to adjust the size of the character, which I will get to later. Finally, you can view the limbs hierarchy. This is useful to see what limbs are child limbs and what are the parent limbs. The hierarchy is placed in a separate window, and we will not view that window at this time. There is basically one last main menu option I want to look at, and since the help menu is self-explanatory, I'd like to take a look at viewports. The main viewport you see is the default. It is the viewport that has the larger image of the character. There are two other viewports. The left viewport shows the left side of the character by default, and the right viewport shows the top of the character by default. The main viewport is active by default, and you are able to make, through the menu, any of the viewports active. An active viewport, say, let's make the right viewport active. The active viewport will have a red border around it. Within this viewport, you're able to do certain options and modifications to the character within that viewport. However, in the viewports drop-down menu, the show left viewport, hide left viewport, zoom in and zoom out of the left viewport, and the show right viewport, the hide right viewport, zoom in right viewport, zoom out right viewport. They do not have to be active to do any of this. For example, the left viewport is not active, and we can go ahead and zoom in. We can also hide the viewport. Being active and using the viewport drop-down menu, you can show different views of the particular character. Right now it's top view, but you can also then click on bottom view. You can click on front view, get a front view, and the same way with the back view, left view, and right view. For most of the main menu options, there is an icon available if you like using a mouse. The first set of icons is just below the main menu. This is the first set of icons. There are various options you can do by just clicking on one of the icons. For example, you can open an ANIMER file, you can load a character, you can save an ANIMER file. And remember, opening and saving an ANIMER file is that AMR file. You can export as a DirectX. However, there is no icon to export as a DBO. You can also then copy keys of a selected limb or of all the limbs. You can then paste the keys of a selected limb or all of the limbs, and you can, of course, then get a texture for your character. And underneath this row of icons is the Select Limb drop-down list. You will use this to select a current limb, and with that current limb you will be able to perform any necessary modifications you'd like to have for that limb. Below the Select Limb drop-down list are what I call the cursor controls. The first two options will affect the character in all the viewports. The arrow key will rotate the selected limb. Like so. The cross cursor will move the selected limb. If the limb is attached to another limb, then it won't move it like you would think. It just stretches the other limb. The next three icons only affect the active viewport. Let's choose the left viewport to be active. This icon option will rotate the camera. The next icon will magnify the character. And if you happen to bring it down to the main viewport when the left viewport is active, it will not affect the main viewport character, but it will still affect the left viewport character. The hand icon option pans the camera or moves the character to another position within the viewport. The last icon option will scale the limbs symbols, and this will affect all the characters or all the viewports. And as you notice, the cursor changes to the icon image. The last thing I would like to mention, well, first let's reset limbs. Now you notice that the limbs did not reset, but that's because the wrong icon or the selected scale limb symbols did not do anything. We moved limbs, so we can reset those. And we also rotated, so we need to select that icon option in order to change everything back, to reset them all back. So now they're all back to the default. So the last thing I would like to mention are the icons below the up-downs step size. This is the up-downs step size, and these are the icons. The top 6 icons will only work with an active viewport, and it's also the same options as in the drop down menu. They are all of the views of the character. So the left view, right view, top view, back view, and bottom view. The last four icon options will affect all of the viewports. We're already looking at textured views, so nothing will happen here, but if you click on the wireframe view, that will then give you the wireframe view. You can go back then to the textured view. This shows all the limb symbols, and of course we're already seeing them, but you can hide them and then show them once again. So this is the end of the first tutorial, and I hope this has been helpful.